to show you how to use the community using the mobile app. To access the mobile app, you need to download Mighty Networks from Apple Store or through Play Store. Once you download Mighty Networks, search for our community, Vidy Potdar, and join. Once you join the community, you will see an interface like this. Here at the very bottom, you can chat with other members in the community. You can add a new post. You can check your notifications through the bell icon, and you can check your profile. You can also add the post from up here. I'll just do a sample post to show how this works. Once you've done that, click post. It will ask you whether you want to add a tag. You can add many of the tags. Let's add research. And you can see the post is now live. You can comment on the post. You can like the post. The same thing can be done from here to the plus icon. It will again take you back to the same thing. You can create a few other things, like you can ask a question, you can create an event, or you can create an article. So if you want to create an article which is available to all the members, it's fairly straightforward as creating a post. You need to give a title, and then start writing the article. Once you've done that, click post. Again, it will ask you to pick a topic. You can say research or any other topic that is relevant. You can say your article is live. Up at the top, you can see these three lines. This gives you the option to discovery, members, topics, groups, events, and settings. So let's go into discovery. Discovery is a place where you will see all the information that the host has put, that is I have put here. There is featured posts or their upcoming events. Top members, these are automatically selected here depending upon who is active on the community. You can see all different types of topics, and you can follow these topics if they are of your interest. Members near you is a very interesting feature of this app. It shows you the members who are close to you geographically, so maybe in the same city or maybe in the same suburb. If you click on members, it will show you different members. These are all the different topics that are created on this. And when you are creating a post or an article, you can select any of these topics to tag your article or your post. In the events tab, you can see any upcoming events that have been posted here. There are different groups that we can create. So far, I have only created 2 groups. If you think you want to create a group and manage a group on the community, please let me know and I can create that group for you. You can go to your personal profile, go to personal settings. You can check your account, you check notifications here. You can get your email updates for any changes that happen on the community whenever anyone posts. You can even get these notifications pushed onto the mobile app. Plus, there are many different types of notifications that you can see, and you have complete control of what kind of notifications you want. So you can enable and disable them as you prefer. You can even edit your profile, add a cover photo, add a mini bio, also give an introduction about yourself, because that will help you and others to find you. The other option that you can see here is the option to invite. You can just add multiple email addresses here and the invites would be sent straight away. You can also share the link for this community on your social network so that they can directly click on the link and join. Once you invite members, you can become a bronze level member, a silver level member, and you become a gold member when you refer and 25 members join the community. There will be specific advantages and benefits for these 3 levels. So that's pretty much, it's very easy to use app. I recommend all of you to download this app from the App Store and start using it. It is a very easy and convenient way to connect with researchers on the community. I hope you all get onto this app. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today. For those who are joining this session for the first time, I would like to tell you that this is a 5-series webinar. I have completed 4 seminars, 4 sessions already, and today is the last and the final session on how to write systematic literature review for high impact factor journals. So, thank you once again. Let's begin today's session. To begin, I would like to show these 4 webinars that I conducted. And the reason I put them here is to show that in the first session, there was a lot of people who attended the webinar. That started to change in session 2. Then session 3 was a bit less. Session 4 was even less. And today we are in session 5. So the mere fact that you all are here today, just shows your commitment to the initiative of writing a good research paper. Many people started but then dropped out in the middle, but you are those ones who have stick with me all 5 sessions, and I know that this is a major commitment you all have done, and I really thank you, and I'm proud of you for being there with me throughout these sessions. So I hope you have learned a lot, and you will learn even more as you continue pursuing your academic initiatives, academic ambitions and dreams. Our community is growing, and I want to thank you all for that as well. Last session, we had 509 members part of the community, and 87 were referred to by all of you, all the loyal participants who have been with me for the last 5 weeks. This week, just before I started the session, I took a screenshot again, and I can see that the numbers have gone further up. So we have 565 people on the community and 118 referred by all of you. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so this is today's agenda. Today's agenda is fairly straightforward. I'm going to talk about the last section of your systematic literature review paper, which is discussion section. And many authors or many journals either have a separate section on discussion and another section on conclusion and future work, or they kind of mix it all together. So discussion is like the last section of the paper. So basically, within the discussion, there are 4 things that we want to cover, or in that section, there are 4 things that we want to cover. One is the discussion of your results. Next is future work, and then limitations of your research, or you can do limitations first, and then that leads to the future work, and then conclusion. So that is kind of the end bit of your research paper. And after that, I have a surprise for you. So stick along for that, and I believe you all will enjoy that the surprise. So we were following the Prisma methodology from the for writing our systematic review. So if you look into the Prisma, these two, we are kind of now at the last bit where we are doing the discussion section, limitations, and conclusion, and future work. So all that is going into the last section of the paper. Okay, so let's begin with the first part, which is I want to talk about discussion of your research. So discussion, when you think about discussion, this is a question that you can imagine your readers are going to ask. So you have completed your results section where you have kind of mentioned all the results that you have got. You have nicely written a good story. You have got the facts. The result is the facts. Yeah, you've done an experiment, you got results. You've done a systematic review, you know what has happened. So when you come to discussion, the question that comes is, so what? You have given me, you have told me that you have done this research. So what? I mean, I can read the research. Tell me what your results mean. Okay, so that is what discussion is all about. In discussion, we are going to try to answer this question, so what? You have done the results, you have done the research, you got the results, so what? So this is kind of the most, I would say, most important part of the paper as well. Like I said earlier on in the webinar one, abstract and introduction is where you have to put a lot of focus, because you're going to tell what you're going to do. And the last bit is the discussion, where you're kind of getting it all together, tying it up like in a nice story. To give you an example of what the so what means, have a look at this picture, have a look at this graph. So if I were to write a results section for in a paper, I would say, when we did the systematic review, we identified there were so many papers. There were, as you can see in this graph, one of the thing is highlighted is there are 40 papers on a specific topic. So that is the results. You are explaining your results. When it comes to discussion, you have to say, so what? You have told me this result, so what? So what are you going to do now? What are you going to tell me about this? So let's pick up the example of these 40 papers. These are published in this category, compounding category. So maybe what you need to do, or what these authors might have done in their paper, is looked out for some reasons why there was such a interest on this particular topic. Was there anything that was related? Was there any funding that was available? Was there any event that happened in the world that kind of attracted researchers to work on this particular topic? So that is an example of research versus discussion. So in discussion, you will try to infer your results, give some arguments, give some reasoning. So in discussion, what we are looking for as a reviewer or as a reader, what we're looking for is the meaning or interpretation of your results. So don't repeat the facts again. So for repeating the fact, or for writing the facts, you have the literature, the results section. So you have done that already. So when you come to the discussion section, don't repeat that again. Okay, just keep that in mind. You have to write an interpretation or meaning. What do your results mean? That is what you have to explain. So previously, I think it was in webinar 3. I showed you this this document, which was from Flinders University. So this also quite nicely points out what is it that the discussion section should have. So firstly, there should be no repetitions of the points that were already made in other sections. So most likely the reference here is to the results section. Have the results been interpreted in relation to the research questions and the aims? So the connection between the research question and your results is what you can do in a discussion section. Have the results been discussed again, discussed in reference to the research questions and the research aims? Sorry, in reference to the research questions, hypothesis, and your conceptual or your theoretical framework. Have conclusions or recommendations been appropriately drawn from the data analysis? Did the researchers highlight the most important results? Have the results been used to support or refute results from other studies? I think this is one thing that we are looking for in discussion. How does your finding relate with what is already out there, with the existing literature? How relevant and useful are the results to practice? So this is something very important. I think it is kind of discipline specific as well. In many management and business research, this is a practice that you suggest how your research could be helpful to practitioners. And I have some examples later today to show you that. So when you're thinking about writing a discussion, the slides that I have got today are kind of question marks, So when you start writing, start to think about these questions and start to reply or write an answer to these questions, so that you will have the content for your discussion gradually built up. So let's see what are some of the questions. So why is your research important? Explain to your reader or reiterate or tell them again that your research is important because of whatever the reason is. What did you do or what you did in your research? What did you find? And what important is, what does it mean? Doing the research is one thing, but conveying the meaning of your research is what is very important, and that is what has to be explained in the discussion section very clearly. So what it means, what you found, what you did, and why is your research important. So let's look at an example. So today what I've done in the slides, I have kind of mixed the concepts and case studies together. So it's not like I'm talking all about the content first and then doing case studies. I thought it would be a interesting idea to have these two things together based on the advice that I got from some of you. Okay, so in this paper, why is your research important? That's been addressed in the first paragraph of the discussion section. What you did, what you found, and what it means is also explained in the first paper or in the first section of the discussion section as well. So try to see when you are reading current or existing literature review papers in your discipline, try to find out these things, how they have written, how they have answered the questions to the topics, to the question, sorry, how they have answered the questions, and which questions, the questions that I have shown you, that I'm showing you, or that I'll show you in the session today. Okay, so let's move on. Let's see what else you can talk about in the discussion. The next thing that you can talk about is, do your findings align with or deviate from existing literature? So you have done a study of literature. What does it say if an existing literature review paper mentions something? Does your research find something different or not? If it finds something different, then mention that. If it aligns, then mention that which research does it align to. So here you can use citations for existing papers, that the findings from my research or findings from our research align with the findings from XYZ or ABC or some authors in that in the discipline. Similarly, how does your results compare with others? So providing that distinction, providing that insights and clarity into what the research is going to be or what your findings are going to be, and how you convincingly justify that in your discussion is very important. Because when you read the discussion section, it should sound like a story. It should not be very how to say struck very, I don't know what the word, I'm not getting the word right now, but it should sound like a story. When you're reading it, it should feel like, okay, you've done these results, now this is what it means. And as I read through the discussion, it gives me the complete feel of your study. So that is what you should expect when you're writing. That is what the readers are expecting, and that is what you should convey in your discussion. So now let's look at an example here. So this is a paper from which one we covered, which I covered, excuse me, which I covered last week as well. This is on sustainable fashion. So let's see what they have done in this paper. So firstly, they mention the need for new theory. Okay, so this is one of the discussion items. So they have this research team has conducted a study on sustainable fashion, and now they have, one of the things that they want to discuss is there is a need for theory building. Then they mention the limitations with current literature. So let's have a read. Yet this research is rarely linked to the sustainable fashion consumption research explored at present. Those that do link these fields, such as this and this authors, suggest that linking sustainability to a benefit for the consumer is by far the most powerful approach to engaging consumers in sustainable consumption practice. So, what other researchers are suggesting? So, aligning or deviating. So, are they saying that their research they agree with the findings of this research, these researchers, or they are deviating? How your results compare with others? So, further, most studies on sustainable fashion consumer behavior use convenience sampling amongst female university students. However, this seems like a missed opportunity to engage with other demographics. So if you read through this sentence, you will see that firstly it is talking about existing studies and what are their limitations or weaknesses of that. At the same time, if you see, they are kind of gently hinting that their findings are different, or that they suggest some future work which is along these directions. Then they go in much more detail, like specifically outline future research should consider sampling individuals of various life stages, ethnicities, and incomes. Understanding of how sustainable fashion may become normalized. Interdisciplinary insights may also offer a deeper understanding of how sustainable fashion may become normalized. So the reason I have highlighted this box in brown color or dark red color is because firstly here they are providing the future direction. What should be the future research? And the next bit that they are doing is they are giving guidance to researchers as to what should be the research methodology that should be adopted. So here the statement is interdisciplinary insights may also offer a deeper understanding. So there is some guidance on what kind of studies future researchers should pursue. The next thing to think about in your discussion is that what you expected to find? So when you start the research, it may be that you have some kind of idea in your mind as to what you are expecting, or you may have some kind of a how to say, an idea of, okay, when I'm doing this research, I'm expecting something like this. But when you collect your data, or you run experiments or do simulations, and you find out that, oh, the results are in fact not what I expected, you know so in that situation, what can you do? You cannot refute your results because you have got the results there, right? So you kind of have to find out why it would have happened and try to come up with a acceptable, justifiable argument that we feel, based on our research setup or our experiments that we did, the reason why we got these kind of results or these unexpected results could be because of this. So here again, you can see the difference. It is not talking about these are my results. You're telling them why these results are like these. It may be that I was expecting to get something like this. However, when we did the experiments, when we run the numbers, when we completed our simulations, we got something different, some variation, something that was not expected. And in that scenario, you have to give a reasonable explanation or your perspective on why you found or why you got such results. So that is again a very useful storyline in your discussion item, in your discussion section. Let's look at another example. So this is again from the paper plastic recycling paper that we used in the previous webinars as well. So let's look at the structure of how they have written this their discussion section. So they're starting with reminding the reader about their purpose. Okay, the purpose of this research is to make a systematic review of the literature on thermoplastic recycling with the context of additive within the context of additive manufacturing. So that is a first sentence that to start your discussion with. So if you are writing your discussion section today or sometime this week, start off with something like this. Start off with first sentence that explains or reminds the reader what is your purpose, what is it that you are doing. And remember, many a times people or readers may or may not finish the whole paper in one go. They may start something today and then probably finish it tomorrow or the day after. So it is a good idea to kind of remind them your research aims and research objectives. Figure 6 and 7 summarizes obtained results. So point to some graphs and tables for summarized information. So in case they do not recall the results, if they have read that results section on some earlier, you can remind them that please refer to these sections or these tables and figures for further information. When you review these two sections, 6 and 7, it is clear that, so now these are some of the things. So there is a growing interest on DRM initiatives as 92 papers were registered in the last decade. Although significant advances have been achieved on the compounding and printing stages in order to develop DRM initiatives, more efforts should be devoted. So we are not talking about future research. More efforts should be devoted by research community to the recovery and preparation stages. Okay, so some future work is kind of coming up quite early on in the discussion. Technical aspects are the most addressed. At 71 papers out of 92 treat the technical dimension. At the same time, environmental, economical, and social are sustainability dimensions that are still to be further developed. So again, direction for future research. In order to achieve this, there is a need for a holistic view, and multiple competencies and points of views are needed. Again, what is required for future? 28 papers were registered having a global vision for the DRAM initiative. So here, if you see, I have highlighted unexpected surprises. So this is just one example. So of 71 papers in the literature, 71 papers in the literature are kind of focusing on one aspect, which is the technical aspect. In that follows the current advances in the field for early stage within the recycling process from figure 4. So if you remember, I had shown you this figure in the previous webinars. So again, reminding the reader of your synthesis framework or the framework that you have used for preparing or for analyzing your systematic review. So this is one example. Next, let's talk about a few other things. What questions should you ask next? You know, you have written the discussion, you're writing the discussion, you have completed your results. So, and you had some initial research questions which you tried to answer through this research process. So, what is it that you should do next? You know, so some examples, some ideas were given in the future work section. Other thing that you can mention is limitations of current research. We saw a few examples early on where this was kind of nicely covered. So when you are doing your write-up, remember to include this as well. And here I'm not talking about limitations of your research. This is limitations of your current research. So you have done your research, yeah, you're writing your discussion section. Within the discussion section, you can relate your findings with existing findings. You know, so you can say, from our results, from our experiments, we found this, and this. However, the existing literature, some of the weaknesses of the existing literature are this, and this. And our research shows that this is a better way to do it, or something along those lines. So we are identifying and mentioning the challenges or the limitations of the current research. Next, what you can talk about is how your results fit with existing research. So I think I gave an example early on as well about whether your studies align or do they deviate from the existing literature. So you kind of have to position your study or your findings in the whole body of literature, right? So if this is your topic, you are going to show that this is where you fit in the research community. This is where your research fits in the whole context of research. So that is very important, and you should explicitly convey that in your discussion section. Then you can also mention about whether there is a need for extending an existing theory based upon the findings that you have got from your study or from your review. So when studies are conducted like this, you get new findings. These new findings can change existing theories or can add more new knowledge or can increase the understanding of the existing theories, and they may even lead to an extension of such theories. So if you think that your findings have made such a contribution, then mention that in your discussion. Okay, now let's look at again another example from the same paper on marketing. So this subsection or this paragraph within this paper starts itself with the need for future research. For example, there is still a clear need to address the main purpose of the sustainable fashion literature. So that is starting off with the research aim, the sorry, not research aim, the future research itself. You can then mention, like this section then mentions limitations of your current research, of their current research. However, research into habit forming around SF is limited. It then goes on and talks about extending the theory is required. Let's see where the sentence begins. In the consumer space, an over reliance on outdated and often refuted theories of consumer decision making limits the development of this field. As aforementioned, consumption in areas such as organic and slow food does not translate into fashion. So what that means is, if you are going to use theories that are kind of sorry. All right. So if you are kind of going to use theories that are designed or tested for organic food or slow food, it may or may not directly apply to the sustainable fashion. So what that means is there is a need to extend that theory using new findings, using new experiments to support uh, to extend the existing theory. So here the theory is about consumption or consumer decision making. So consumer decision making theories designed for organic food or slow food may not apply for sustainable fashion. What questions should you ask next? Theories more applicable to fashion consumption need to be developed. Okay. To know how consumer habits change, new theories of consumption need to be developed. So there are suggestions for two things to be done, two new questions to be asked for that matter. And that is, what theories should be more theories that are more applicable to sustainable fashion needs to be investigated, needs to be developed or designed. At the same time, new theories for consumption as well needs to be considered. So those are the two ideas of consumption theory extension. Okay, now the last bit here is I want to point out is very important because it gives you a suggestions for methodologies for future research. And I think I covered that a little bit earlier as well, that as part of the future work, when you raise a question for future work, as an expert in this field, researchers are also expecting your advice or your guidance on how this problem or this research question that you have suggested can be answered. What would be the appropriate research methodology that researchers should adopt to study that problem? So that is done very nicely here. So let's see. Interventions, longitudinal studies, and innovative research designs may be useful in exploring this uncharted territory where the externalities of habit change are largely unknown. Okay, so this is a suggestions for future research. Let's move on. What the other things, some of the other things that you can cover in the discussion is what needs to be answered, what could be explored in the future, and do ambiguities exist in the existing literature. So one of the reasons why the discussion section is really important is because it handles a lot of important questions. It is not, it is more so about, like I started the session with, so what? you know so you have done this study, so what? So what needs to be answered next? What could be explored further in the future? Do you provide a guideline or a plan for researchers to uh, take this research topic? So if you when you read a really good article, some the and which is one of the reason I think I mentioned earlier in my webinars as well, is when you start your research, the foundation of your research has to be a strong research paper or a strong research article. There are two reasons for that. One is, if you start with something weak and you build something on top of it, it will be weaker. So I mean, what I mean to say here is, if the research that if you have selected as a basis for your study and that is flawed, and you spend your time working on that research, and then you build something upon it, the foundation itself is flawed, so your research may have some elements that are not accepted in the research community or by other researchers. So what you should do in that case, or what I suggest, is the ideal situation is to start off with a good journal, which is why I told you early on that look for Q1 ranked journals that are highly ranked and reputed journals in your field and in your discipline. And the reason for that is, one is, I already told you that if you choose a poor journal or a poor research, what you build will also be poor. Yeah, the foundation itself is not right. And the second is, when you are going to go and publish your paper, they will see, the reviewers would see that where did you start, and if they see that your starting point was a paper that was published in a non was not published in a reputed journal, or the paper or the contributions of the paper were questionable, what would happen is, they would kind of not trust what you're trying to say. Your research may be very good, you might have followed really all the best practices, but because your starting point was not right, the rest all does not kind of doesn't matter, or they consider it is as it does not matter. So remember that starting your research at the very is very where you start your research is very important, and hence when we do the exclusion and inclusion criteria, when you start as part of the systematic literature review, that is the reason. We want to start with quality and build more quality. Okay, let's look at some examples now. So comment about, so in this example, what they have done in the discussion section, let's see. Comment about overall literature review. In the reviewed literature, several studies chose a particular waste source or type of plastic waste in the recyclability analysis. The remaining question is how to evaluate a particular waste source or niche, defining qualitative indicators that allow practitioners to choose materials that can be printable. So if you look at my comment on the right, it is talking about what needs to be answered. Again, an example of a future related work that you could do, or you could recommend others doing. A systematic analysis to qualify possible monostream waste resource is unclear from the evidence of the reviewed studies. So some ambiguity still exists in the literature. Something is not addressed, something is not tackled, some clarity is still required. A data-driven framework with Internet of Things and data mining technologies could be explored, could be explorative approaches to implement for distributed recycling. So an example of what could be explored in the future, the suggestions for future research work. Similarly, some more examples here. So what you see in such examples, or when you see the when you see the discussion section written by different papers, you try to get an idea of what is it that they are covering, how they are framing their arguments, what is the order in which they are answering specific items, and those items or those uh, elements of their discussion is kind of helping you, is kind of making a story, and that is helping you to understand the whole inference or the meaning of research. So one of the activities that you can do yourself is pick up a few papers, yeah, few papers, look at their discussion section, and in the discussion section kind of tag each and every sentence. Yeah, so what I mean by that is, do what I have done here. Yeah, do this, pick up one sentence and make an arrow. We can do it on paper, doesn't have to be digital, or whatever, whichever way you prefer. Highlight a particular sentence and say this sentence is talking about the limitation, this sentence is talking about the future work, this sentence is talking about something else and something else. And the questions that I have given you in this webinar, maybe use that as a guidance, as a guide to tag these different sentences. So pick every sentence, look at the slides, and see, okay, is this talking about the significance of the research? Is it talking about why the research was done, when was it done, who did it, what information they are covering in the discussion? Because like I said earlier on as well, that you learn a lot by reading papers that are written by experienced researchers in good quality journals. So keep that as your benchmark. Don't be in a rush to publish something just for the sake of getting you a paper. Always focus on quality, because that is what will last with you for your in your academic career. Okay, so I did not put a Q&A slide here, but we have kind of taken like nearly 45 minutes. If you have any questions, I can take some questions now, and then we can move to the next bit. And I can see there are some questions. I'll have a quick look at the chat window to see what questions are there. Okay, so Rodrigue, excuse me. Okay, your question here is, when my research is about a specific country or continent, can I compare my findings with those conducted outside my research area? I mean, specific country or continent. Okay, so I think you would need to find out conceptual similarities. So if you're talking about a country, if it's a developing country, you could compare your findings with other developing countries. If it is a developed country, you can compare your findings with developed countries. So I think try to find out some alignment with whom you are going to compare your results. So if it's a specific country or continent, yeah, definitely. I think try to find a country which is similar to the country that you are currently studying. Can I compare my findings with others' research using different methodology, or it should be the same methodology? Okay, so this kind of comes back to the point that I made early on in my presentation today, is as academics or as researchers in the discipline, or as experienced researchers in the discipline, you can guide existing research future researchers on what kind of a methodology should be used. So if like in the previous examples, I talked about some future work and some studies that have actually mentioned what should be the research methodology. Okay, so that is the first bit. So in terms of your question, using a research methodology, whichever methodology it may be, is a vehicle, I would say, to find a solution to your research question. Okay, so if your whatever your research question is, if you can uh, solve it using if you have taken a methodology which is, say, qualitative methodology, quantitative methodology, design science methodology, science and engineering methodology, whatever methodology you chose to solve your problem, what is the finding? Yeah, so think about the finding, because I don't want to know how you got to the results, but what are your results? So this is a problem, this is the result. Then you can say firstly, you can compare it based on the results, and secondly, if you want to go further detail, you can say that this particular study adopted a qualitative methodology, for example, or a quantitative methodology, whatever that may be, and they found these results. So it is up to you on how you kind of want to tell your story. If your story is about in the discussion is more focused on the findings of the existing results, or sorry, a comparing of the existing results with your results, or you want to take a more take an approach where you want to focus more on the methodology that they have taken to solve the problem. So I think you can write the story both ways. Okay. Are there any more questions related to this topic? And to answer your question, yeah, I will try to plan some lectures on research proposals, not specifically on a particular topic, but just on how to do a research proposal. But probably not next week. I want to take a break for a few weeks and then plan the next webinar. Are there any more questions? No? Okay, so what we will do is I'll just take a quick 5-minute break. Not feeling very well today. I'll just go grab a glass of water, and then we will continue with the next session. Okay, I'm back. Thank you very much for waiting. I see there's a question from Himanshu. Is it a good idea to make a separate subsection on open issues and future direction in a bit more detail to benefit other researchers? Yes, Himanshu, that is right. And I'll probably give an example in the coming slides where this is a practice. This has been done, and it would be an good example to see that. So give me a few minutes till I get to that slide. Okay. So now the next part is again another way in which we can talk about discussion is the structure of the discussion. So I've taken a few more examples here to show you how this section would look like. All right. So let's see this paper first here. When they are starting the discussion, they gave a layout of the discussion section. So what do they say? This review paper was conceived based on the basis of 3 research questions, as stated in the introduction section. This section will lead discussion on those 3 questions in the same order. So this paper has taken an approach of writing the discussion based on 3 research questions that they have selected. And the write-up has been along those 3. So here you can see research question 1. What are the existing industry 4 readiness models? And then they have given a discussion that kind of addresses this question. So this is also one way of writing your discussion section, where the focus is on answering the questions that you have raised for your systematic literature review. So when you think about the structure of your review, you can you can think about these, say, four questions here again. List your major findings. So remind the reader about your research question, so which we saw in a few examples before. At the same time, do mention what is the or highlight the novelty of your research. Tell the reader that the research that you have done is innovative, is novel, and why is it innovative? Why is it new? What is the novelty of your research that you can explain as well as part of your discussion. Recap your research significance. Try to give or explain the reader, what is the value of your research, why your research is important, why they should read your research, why they should apply the findings of your research. So this is the point. This is your opportunity in the discussion section to convey all this information. List your key observations. So as part of your results, there may be a lot of things that you would have collected or evaluated, analyzed, and reported in your results section. But discussion is a point. The discussion section is a time where you can kind of pick up or highlight a few of these findings and elaborate them in more detail. So if you find, say, if your results are, say, gather 10 results, maybe pick 3 or 2 or 3 of those 10, and those that you think are really, really important findings, or from which you can kind of suggest a lot of new research directions or future research directions. So pick those findings and explain it a bit more in detail, flesh it out a little bit, kind of give them more, give the readers more insights on those specific observations. And your opinion or your take on those observations. So that is, and that could also be a way to structure your literature, your discussion section of your literature. Because one of the things that you would think is, how am I going to what are going to be the subsections within my discussion section? What are the sub areas? What are the different paragraphs so that I will write about? So I would suggest, if you are starting this process, do the try to answer all the questions that I'm asking in this presentation. Okay, so write the question, write the answer, write the question, write the answer. Once you have answered all these things, you at least have the content that you need for your discussion. Next step would be kind of putting it all together, gluing it all together in a nice nice way, so that you convey your findings, your interpretation of your findings in the best possible way. All right, let's look at an example here. So in this paper, this is where the section begins, and in this article they have given implications. So the write-up of this article for the discussion section is different, or is a different way. So what I've you can again refer back to this paper. This is the paper from on firm internationalization, a management area paper. But have a look at this paper, and they talk about the discussion in from 2 point of views, from two idea things. So one is implication for theory development, and if I remember correctly, the other one was implications for methodology. So here they're saying that this is a something that we need to think from a theory perspective, and if we are going to go on that front to implement or to build those theories, what methodologies should be useful or should be used. Okay, so let's look at the structure of this discussion section. In our view, we identified and analyzed 138 empirical studies that have examined the firm internationalization from the cognitive perspective. So comment about your overall literature. Yeah, that is the approach that they have taken. By systematically organizing and analyzing this large but seemingly fragmented body of literature, we have offered a solid basis for the future cumulative knowledge building. So their major contribution or their novelty of their research is highlighted in the second paragraph, in the second sentence. As table 2 summarizes, again pointing the reader to a organized piece of information, yeah, like a table or a figure. As table 2 summarizes, we identified 3 main streams of research, including their key theoretical insights and challenges. So what they're doing, listing their major findings. Building on these findings, we now turn to discuss the implications for future research and theory development in this field. So if you look at each sentence of this paragraph is communicating something. Yeah, so each sentence here is addressing one particular aspect. So starting with the overall literature, comment on their literature, what they have done, what was their contribution or the novelty of their research, what were their main findings, and then what should be the future research. So every line in this sentence has a meaning and has a structure. These lines have not just been randomly written. So there is a careful thought that has gone into the writing of this section of the paper, or of the section, of the discussion section. Let's see what they are doing in the next paragraph. Organizing the existing literature allowed us to identify 4 areas of cognitive research that have received relatively less attention. Okay, so that line itself is a line or a statement that you can apply in your paper as well. So when you could write, organizing the existing research allowed us to identify 4 areas, maybe if it's not 4 areas, maybe 5 areas, 10 areas, whatever it may be, of cognitive research that have received relatively less attention. So pick up some of these ideas. Don't just copy paste statements as it is. That would be plagiarism. But what I'm trying to say is, understand the structure of the writing. That is important. Similarly, some more observations here. These areas are, then they mention 4 different areas: managerial learning, characteristics of upper echelons, intra-organizational perceptions, and external actors, and so on. Next, we discuss the implications for and importance of further research on these areas. So now you can see they are going to write about these 4 topics. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. These 4 topics, or these 4 areas, these 4 topics or these 4 areas could be like the structure of their discussion. So it is not randomly coming up and saying that, okay, I'm going to start writing discussion and these are some of my opinions. No, don't do that. Give it a proper thought, give it a proper structure or a proper layout, and then start filling in this information. So my suggestion to you all is, that in your discipline, in your area, identify good 3-4 articles published in top Q1 journals and learn from their writing. You can definitely learn from their research as well, but learn from their writing, because when you read such papers, every line is useful. You don't feel like this line is not adding any information, anything valuable. Everything seems very useful and very valuable. Okay, let's look at the next thing that you can think of. So, mention if you have handled a novel research question. So, I mean, this you would have done already, because in the webinar too, we spent a lot of time to understand or spend a lot of time identifying existing systematic literature reviews, what they have tried to find out, and you have based your research question or the objective of your research using these research questions. So there is a lot of novelty already. Another thing that you can do, and which we saw in a previous example, was mapping your findings with your research objectives. And one of the examples that I showed you, they even actually started itself with saying that we are going to structure the discussion based upon these research questions that we highlighted, or that we have mentioned in the introduction section. So that could be another way to kind of bring it all together. So this was the research questions these were the research questions that we raised at the start of the paper. We conducted the research, we got the findings, and we are now going to tell you again, based on those research questions, what is our interpretation of the results that we have got. And while doing this interpretation, you could compare that with prior literature. So you've got the research question, you have answered the research question based on your results, then you go and also compare your findings with what is out there. And in terms of reporting this comparison, you can also take the example of your systematic review, sorry, the literature review, the section 2 of your research, of your systematic review paper, as example that in the previous systematic reviews this was done. However, in compared to what they have done, we have found this, so you can even compare with the systematic review findings as well. Let's take another example. Which paper is this? This is the continuation of the same paper, firm internationalization paper. So in this section, they are highlighting the need for future research, the contribution, and the inference. So let's have a read. First, there is a need for future research on how learning at the level of individual managers influences the organizational learning and knowledge transfer during internationalization. While this has been conceptually addressed, and they have given a reference here, empirical research remains scarce. So what that means is, again, a future direction, but it is also an inference from the from this study. So that is one thing. Again, identify the writing style or learning from the flow of arguments that make your discussion section very interesting. Okay. Mention another thing that you can kind of incorporate in your writing is if you have found new ideas through your research. So when you begin your research, you have initial thought of what is it that you could find. But if you find something new, something different, mention that in your discussion. And also within the abstract, there is a section where you have to talk about originality or a value. So here, for example, I've got a simple screenshot of how they mention the originality or value of their research. This review identifies knowledge gaps and informs managerial decision making in the field, particularly through serving as a foundation for future research. So an example for some new ideas. You could also mention if your findings strengthen existing ideas or theories. That is, what that means is, if there is a piece of research that has been done in the past, they have got some findings. Now you have done a similar research, or you have done a research that kind of gets similar findings. What that only does is it kind of strengthens the existing research, because another research team, that is your team, has done this research and they have evaluated maybe a different set of data, but the findings are aligned with the existing theory. So mention that if that is the case. Then again, reiterate the fact that your findings are important. Why are your findings important? Convey that to the reader. And when you're writing a paper, not just a systematic review paper, but even a standard research paper, think about how others are going to read it? What information do they need from your paper, and can you provide that information in an easy to find format? I'll give you an example here. Imagine that you have completed, and this is an empirical example. Okay, so you have written a research paper, empirical paper, not a review paper. And somebody now is going to select your paper for their systematic literature review. Okay, so you have a research paper and somebody is using that research paper for doing a systematic literature review. Or even not to confuse you further, let's imagine that you have written a systematic literature review paper and somebody now is going to write a new systematic literature review paper, and they want to use your research, your systematic review paper, as an example in their section 2 of your paper, of their paper. Okay, which is finding out who else has done a similar systematic review paper. Okay, so what information would they be looking for from your paper? Start to think about that. They may want to know that when you did your systematic review, how many papers did you review? What was your inclusion and exclusion criteria? Which kind of journals did you select? So all this information that they need, if you can present that information in easy to find way, they will like your paper and they will cite your paper. So even in the discussion section, think about the same thing. What does the reader wants to know from your paper? Who is the reader is the first question. Yeah, is it another researcher who is doing a research? Is it going to be a practitioner from the industry who has that problem and your paper solves that problem? Can you answer that in that format, so they can just pick up that bit of information from your paper, and then they feel like, oh wow, this gives me the answer that I was looking for. So try to synthesize those findings in a way and think about who is going to use that information or that knowledge that you're creating. Okay, let's take another example. So this is a sustainable fashion paper. Again, what they have synthesized their findings here. They have some inference, suggestions for future research, and layout for their discussion section. Okay, so this is the first paragraph of their discussion and future research. So future research here they have referred to as research agenda. Okay, so what do they say here? It is still a field in its infancy. Yeah, so they have inferred this by doing the systematic review. By doing the systematic review, they have inferred that this is still a field in its infancy, with large gaps in the in literature, gaps in understanding. Table 7 summarizes the key areas of future research identified above, and this section now synthesizes the findings. So Himanshu, you had mentioned here that is it a good idea to make a separate subsection on open issues and future directions? So this paper has kind of answered that question for you. So here they have done a separate table for future research areas. And then what do they say? Moreover, while the difference between pragmatic and radical change perspectives on how to deliver more sustainable fashion practices has been highlighted, the authors advocate where is it? The authors on how to deliver, yeah, has been highlighted. The authors advocate for a combination of both approaches to make meaningful ecological change on fashion. In drawing the different clusters together, 6 overarching themes are identified. So these 6 themes is how the discussion section is structured. And these sections are appealing to a wider demographic, changing shopping habits, influencing production, and so on. So those are the 6 areas of how this section has been, how the discussion section has been structured. Okay, let's move on. Another thing that you can mention is identify the strengths and limitations of your research. So like I mentioned in the beginning that some researchers prefer to have the discussion section separate with the future work and limitations, or some kind of integrate that together in the whole discussion explanation itself, the discussion write-up itself. So you could do that here. So identify strengths and limitations of your research. So it's not just the limitations, because that is one other thing that is maybe confusing, that or maybe people think that it is only the limitations that is what you have to mention in the discussion. But no, not just limitations, also mention your strengths, because the strengths will then kind of overshadow your limitations, because the idea is that you understand that there are limitations of your research. You have mentioned those limitations of your research, and you can also mention the implications of these limitations. So again, for limitations also you can ask the same questions. So what? So you have to answer that so what for the limitations as well. Okay, so this example gives how you can write about the practical or managerial implications. So in the previous slide, sorry, one thing that I also mentioned was to list practical or managerial implications. So an example for this is here. In terms of implications, this review paper has significance for government policy, industry, and SMEs. So what is that? What does that mean? So the research that is conducted in this paper will be or could be potentially used by these 3 different types of readers. So it could be government officials who are reading this paper because they want to develop a new policy. It could be industry professionals who want to apply the findings of your research, or it could be small and medium enterprises who want to adopt the your research into their business. So here, firstly, you mention who is going to use the research, right? Who is going to use the research? So these are the 3 readers, and how will they use this research? Okay, so for policymakers, the findings of this study can help government to improve their economy through gap assessment on their industry 4.0 readiness. That is one. For industry, organizations can improve their competitive advantage in domestic and international markets, and so on. And for SMEs, this paper provides 6 main dimensions that all SMEs in common can benefit. So you mentioned the different users who would read your paper, and also mention how they should read your paper, how or what value they will get by reading your paper. So that is an example of mentioning practical implications. Okay. Himanshu, again, to answer your question, this is an example of a table of future research. Areas for future research. They have identified 7 areas, I think, for future research, and they have given a explanation as well. Supply chain, retail, consumer behavior. So they have categorized the future research in 2 categories: pragmatic change and radical change. So pragmatic or practical change could be doing this or exploring these topics as future research, and radical change could be coming up something completely radical, and these are the future research questions or areas of research under those headings. So you could come up with a description of this sort as well. Okay, so it is not always necessary that you include your research, future research, just as in the text, but you can also have it as a table. Okay, so I've got some time for Q&A here now. Let's see if you have any questions. Okay, there is one question here. If our findings are new, there were no previous literature, how to mention in the discussion page in the research paper? If our findings are new. So if your findings are new, you can just mention your findings. You do not need to compare it with anything, because if there is nothing to compare, you cannot compare, right? So you would not need to compare with anything. But if there is something that is already published and that is kind of similar in your area or similar in your space, you can compare. I think I would say that this would be a very rare situation that you would not find anything at all to compare your findings against. That would be really breakthrough research, I would say, if you come across something like that. On most occasions, you would find something that you could relate to, in the context of your research or in your discipline. There's always something that is close to you or closely related to the work that you are trying to do. Okay, let's check the next question. Ashwini, how to start writing research paper and how to search paper, which paper is suitable for research? So I think, Ashwini, you should follow all my 5 webinars that I have done, because in that I have actually I have actually taught how to write a systematic literature review paper from the start. So webinar 1 is where I talk about how to write abstract and introduction. Webinar 2 is where I talk about how to do literature review for your systematic review paper. Webinar 3 is on methodology, where we adopt the Prisma methodology. Webinar 4 is on writing the findings, and this webinar 5 is on discussion. So although this webinar series is for writing a systematic literature review paper, the process is kind of similar if you are going to do a empirical paper as well. So maybe in the future, I would do another webinar series which focuses on writing an empirical paper, and you could follow that. But in the meanwhile, if you want to write a systematic review paper, you can follow these 5 webinars that I have done. Thanks, Prasad. Okay, next question. How do we present the discussion if the results obtained contradict the hypothesis or do not conform to what we expect? Okay, so I think I mentioned that earlier on as well. If your results are if the results that you get are not what you expected to get, I think what you need to report or what you need to include in your discussion is firstly giving a background of why do you think that this happened, why your hypothesis was contradictory to what you had thought, and then give a thought to that finding as to why you would have kind of got that result. What was it about the data that you collected? Was the data not sufficient? Was the data maybe not the participants who provided that data, maybe they were not relevant? Or there could be many reasons why you could arrive at that situation. So at that stage, I think it is more important to find out why is it that you have got, and can you come up with some reasonable justification to the situation, and report that in your discussion. The next question is, can I mention percentage result when I necessary to write in analytical section? Or can I mention percentage when I don't actually understand your question very well, but I think if I understand what you have written, you're probably asking is, should you mention the percentage results in terms of percentage or ratios in the analytical section? Then I would say, yeah, you could do that. It's no problem there. You could follow that. Okay, are there any more questions at this point? Okay, so there are no more questions. I will move on. So when you are writing discussions, I want to share some tips now of how you can write a good discussion. So overall, you have to focus on the major findings. So don't miss out on any of these things. You have to try to ensure or try to convey your discussion in a very easy to understand manner. So focus on the major findings. Start with the research questions that you have that you had in as a start. Interpret your findings and link to existing research. So we discussed that. I showed you a few examples as well on how to do that. What other ways can you interpret your research findings? Could you think about a different angle or a different perspective that you can take to answer your research questions? If you can do that, then I think that is also another tip. Mention why your findings are important. Expand, if your findings expand or substantiate an existing theory, then make a mention of that. And another thing that you could do is you can start making the points that you want to write in a discussion section from the very beginning, from the time you begin your research, from the time you begin your write-up. Because what happens is many a times you get good ideas or good arguments or justifications that you could use in the discussion section. So if you take notes, write your ideas, or use some of the mobile apps that you can to record your ideas when you get them, I think it kind of it will kind of collect all these things, and you can use it at the end. And this not only applies to the discussion section of your paper, but throughout any paper, any section of the paper that you are planning to write. So start making points when as soon as you begin your research, or even before, when you are kind of planning your research. Remember who is the reader and what does the reader want from your paper. Okay, and if you can, like I gave the example before, if you can tailor your a section in your discussion for a particular type of reader. For example, in that example that I gave before, we spoke about how the research could be used by government for policy making, how it could be used by industry, and how it could be used by SMEs. So in that paper, they only had one sentence for each type. You can actually have a paragraph, for how this research could be used by government to inform policy, or how industry professionals can apply the findings from this research. So even you can go to that extent as well, where you can prepare particular a detailed section or a paragraph at least for each of your reader type. And when you think about a reader, your reader, and you're thinking about how to write for that particular reader, it will give you some more insights on how you can write your research. You can, so for example, in the previous slide I mentioned, what other ways can you interpret your research findings? So one of the way to interpret your research finding could be from the perspective of who is going to be reading your paper. Yeah, so who is the reader? So if you keep that in mind, you will get ideas on how you want to write that bit of information. When you're writing for a particular reader, think about what is your reader interested to know, and your section or your write-up for that particular reader should answer that question. And that's how your research paper is going to be more impactful. I think in one of the earlier sessions, I did mention about the general trend in research or academia, where the focus is now gradually moving towards the impact of your research. It is not just the impact is not just measured by the number of citations that you receive for your research paper, but it is the impact. The definition of impact is becoming more broader. Yeah, and now we are looking at how your research kind of impacts outside of academia. Does it help the industry? Does it help the government? Does it help non-profit organizations who can kind of pick your research and apply it to solve their practical business problems or practical problems that they are facing in a particular situation? So think about that as well when you're writing your discussion, and make it easier for these readers or your audience basically to kind of give them the information that they need in a very in an easy manner. So that's another tip for writing your discussion. Next, what you can write, justify your ideas. So I think this was going back to the question asked by Edna Vati, that what happens if my findings contradict my hypothesis. So this is the time where you need to justify your research. So think of your ideas, how you can justify your ideas, how you can justify your observations and interpretations of the research. List all things that you did not knew when you started your research. So that is another way. I have seen many good articles write about it is about their personal research experience before they started this research. So if, for example, if you are going to write about your systematic review, there is some information that you did not know, or there is a lot of information that you probably didn't know. But how you are going to take that information and mention that of your own learnings, what you did not know when you started the research, and what you kind of know now, how you have grown as a researcher or as a research team. May put that in the writing, and make each point as a separate section or at least a separate paragraph. So each paragraph has a theme, has a contribution to make. So when anyone is kind of picking up a particular paragraph and then they're reading it, all the ideas that are, or all the text that is there in that paragraph is about a particular theme, is about a particular topic of the discussion. So try to keep that cohesiveness and coherence in your research write-up. All right, so let's move on to next part, which is about what things you should avoid. So far I've talked about what all you should cover. Now I think it also makes sense to kind of explore what things you should avoid. So these are the things you should avoid in the discussion. Don't repeat your findings because you already have a dedicated section to explore your findings. So don't bring anything new, not at all anything new to the discussion section, because whatever findings you have to report, you have done that in the results section. Don't add any new data to your discussion. I've seen some papers kind of do that, and it is a very is not a good thing to do. Also, don't over inflate your findings, because when you do that, the reader can actually figure out, the reviewers can actually can easily figure out you're just trying to bump up your findings, over inflate your findings by going through and explaining it too much. Just keep it practical, just keep it reasonable. Don't, again, in terms of the interpretations as well, don't overdo it. Keep it reasonable. Avoid long strings. Make sure that every sentence is not too long, and every sentence conveys something valuable for the reader to read. Also avoid tangential issues, maybe something that is related to what you're talking about, but it is not really the core aim of this research paper. But if you're writing a discussion section for your thesis, then I think that it is acceptable to have some acceptable to have this. When you're writing the discussion, these are some of the words or phrases that you may find useful, or others have used that in their writing as well. So let me just make it full screen. So the terms that you can use, words or phrases that you can use, like may, might, could, show, study suggests, probably, it is possible that, it may be the case, possibly, likely, looks like, seems so, most likely, appear to be, tend to, slightly, some evidence, and so on. So depending upon how confident and comfortable you are with your research findings, you could use words like this. So if you are very confident, you can say the results are this. If you are a little bit not sure, or your findings or your results do not give you, say, 100% confidence, then you can say results show that, it might be, possibly, likely. So these kinds of words. So when you're reading a literature review paper now, or the discussion part in the literature section, look for these words. These would be the words that you would see are being used in the discussion section. Okay, limitations. So research limitations are inevitable. So there are going to be limitations. There is no research, excuse me. There is no research that is reported that has no limitations. Okay, so but limitations should not be, the whole research should not be full of limitations. So you have to be, you have to, what you have to convey through the write-up is that you are aware of your limitations. You can also go to that step of explaining the implications of your limitations. So what, if this is a limitation of my research, how does it affect the research? You should have that knowledge, you should have that understanding, and you should convey that in your paper, in your writing. And lastly, you have to think about, are these limitations acceptable? Because if you have some really unrealistic limitations of your research, and you mention that in your paper that these are my limitations, but still accept my paper, it may not make sense to do that. So think about the how acceptable your limitations are. So how have some papers written their limitations? In terms of study limitations, the review performed in this study was based on historical data, which is a snapshot of a given situation at a specific point of time, so on and so forth. This paper also sets a research agenda for the future. So this is talking about limitations and future work. For some reason, I think this is my mistake, I haven't cited this properly. I might have missed out on providing the right citation, but this is an open access, it is an open access paper, and I will put the reference to this paper, this citation for this in the YouTube description. So this is my mistake, so apologies for that to the authors of this paper. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Future work. So limitations actually give rise to give you a good idea of how to structure your future work. And if you understand your limitations, you can give kind of map your limitations with your future work. So that is one way of writing your future work. And another future work is not based on your limitations. It is based on the limitations of the literature. What has not been studied in the literature. That could be included as the could be the pointers of your future research. So you can mention what study is needed next, and you can also mention what method should be used for doing this study. Okay, so those are the two things that when you do a future work, a proper future work, you should include. Also, you mention, also remember that for a systematic review paper, one of your core contribution is the future work. Okay, so people are reading your literature review paper. One is to understand what has happened, how the literature has progressed, or how the body of knowledge has evolved over time. But one of the other reasons why a lot of researchers would read your research paper is to find out what should be done next. And as an authority in this area, you should provide guidance to future researchers as to what research needs to be done and how you suggest it should be done. So I'm talking about methodology now. So one is the research question, and the second is the research methodology that you would suggest for use for doing that study. Okay, so coming to the conclusion part of the discussion section, this could be, like I said, could be a part of the could be part of the discussion section itself, or could be a separate section on its own. So when you are writing a conclusion, be confident, clear, and be very controlled on how you are writing the conclusion. So you can call it like a 3 C's: being confident in your writing, being clear, and being controlled of how you are writing. And the literature, the conclusion section should kind of give the feeling that, okay, now the paper is coming to an end, and these are some of the things that we did. So if you want, or what I've seen some papers do, is restate your aims. So kind of getting it all together. This is what we intended on doing. This is what we have done. Mention your core findings. Again, like I mentioned in the for the discussion section, you can pick 3 or 4 core observations, core findings from your study, and report that in the conclusion. And you kind of formally close your research paper. So closing your research paper, raising future research questions, and kind of getting the reader the feel that, okay, the paper is now coming to an end. We are concluding this. Many a times I've seen authors take the structure they have used in the abstract for the conclusion. So in the abstract, they write it in the future tense, which is we will do this, we will do this. Whereas in the conclusion, they do it in the past tense, which is I have done this, or we have done this study, we got these findings, these were our observations, and so on. So that is also a way to kind of write up your conclusion. Be so like in conclusion, I said, be concise, bring it all together, and provide a sense of reflection, which means you have done this study, you spend fair bit of time doing it properly. So how do you reflect upon this whole experience? So that is something you can incorporate in your conclusion as well. Another thing, or like a tip I would say, is don't start the first sentence of your conclusion that is like in conclusion or in summary. That sounds too artificial because you're already in the conclusion section, and it is probably the last paragraph of your paper. So readers are expecting that it is going to be conclusion. So don't use that sentence, in conclusion, in summary. I've seen it used many times, but my suggestion or my opinion would be to not have that. Okay, so I've got another Q&A session now. So if you have any questions, then please do post them in the chat box. Ashwini, very nice session. Thank you for sharing such valuable information. Thanks, Ashwini, and thanks for joining. Ranuri, valuable session, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So please do post some questions now so I can take them up. Okay, so let me get this question. Can we cite other research in conclusion? So I think it would depend on why you want to cite other research in the conclusion section. But yeah, there is no problem if you're citing other researchers. It may be that you're comparing your findings with others, but it's too late. Maybe in the discussion, sorry, in the conclusion section. But if you want, you can. There is no stopping from doing that. Next session. Ashwini, I think of the last 5 weeks, like last 5 Sundays, I have been here. So I think I'll probably take a break for a few weeks. And one of the things that I'm going to ask you all in the feedback form for this week is to give me some ideas of what is it that you want the next webinar to be, so I can plan accordingly. Santvana, is there any specific length of result and discussion in SLR? I think it would be very much specific to the research problem that you have addressed, that you have taken, as well as the kind of results that you have. But I would say, like I prefer to say the discussion section and future work would at least be 30% of your paper. So that way it's very thorough, like, because what I said, your one of the contribution of your systematic review is the future work and how the future research questions should be addressed. So you should kind of imagine the 30% probably is for the future work and a discussion and future work section. Findings probably could be another, I would say, 30% of the paper. So that's 60%, and the rest is rest 40% could be between introduction, uh, existing literature review summaries, and the research methodology as per Prisma. So that could be all 40%. So that could be like a rough breakdown, but you can see papers published in your discipline and work out the breakdown. Look, and again, I would emphasize that only look for papers from high impact factor and Q1 journals. BB, thank you for such an informative session. I learned a lot. Okay, thanks a lot, BB. That is good. And I would want all of you to be able to actually work towards your systematic review paper. Everything is so clear, no more doubts. Thanks, Hina. John, thank you for taking us through this educational process of writing SLR. Thank you. If you have learned anything, I think I'm very happy for that. Thanks for the session. I would like to know if we have less than 10 articles published in the field in my country, can we still do a systematic literature review? Or how can we use these articles for a journal publication? Okay, so to answer your question, it is I think in one of the webinars, I did take an example of a research paper, a systematic literature review paper that had 9 research papers. So they had written a systematic review, SLR, using 9 research papers. So maybe have a look at the early, I don't remember which webinar it was, but it is one of these 5 ones. So have a look at those and see how they have used those 9 papers. Or what kind of publication can we produce in this case? So I think I just refer to that, the previous webinar. How to find the specific to be published journal for our SLR? How to find? How are you asking how to find a specific journal for your SLR? So I think one thing is look at the journals that you have cited. So if in your SLR you selected say 100 papers, look at those 100 papers and where they are published, and then look at those journals. So make a list of those journals, and then look at whether those journals publish systematic review papers or not. And if they do, then that could be a where you could publish. So that could be a strategy that I would suggest. If we only used Google Scholar to determine papers for our study, should we also write another SLR paper which should cover the remaining papers using other paid or subscribed journals? Okay, in Arnie, to answer your question, uh, Google Scholar kind of includes or indexes all the journals, paid or unpaid journals. So everything is there in Google Scholar. And I have made another video which I shared last week, I think, about how you can find high quality journals from Google Scholar. Yeah, so use that video. If you're not using, say, Web of Science or Scopus, then the challenge that you have is Google Scholar shows you everything, all conferences, all journals, anything that is, there is no kind of restriction or filtering on the quality of the papers. So you would first need to go to Shimago to find out which journals are Q1 or Q2 ranked journals. I would recommend only those. And then go to Google Scholar and individually search papers from those Q1, Q2 journals. So it will take more time, but you can still filter out high quality papers using Google Scholar. So you should follow that. How the external and internal examiners evaluate Viva? For each section, they will give marks. Please throw some light on it. I'm not sure if this is in the context of systematic reviews, and if you mean examiners as the reviewers of the paper. So if you look at the Prisma guidelines, I would quickly take you through. Okay, if you look at the Prisma guidelines, there is this last column here, which is where you have to mention on which page you have covered this topic. Okay, so if your limitations or your discussion, which page is that covered? So if you give that Prisma document, this template with your journal when you're writing the submitting the journal for paper for review, it makes the job of the reviewer much easier on how they can or where they can find this relevant information. So yeah, I think you could apply that. The other question I think is probably more in the context of thesis, so I will not cover that here, but in the future webinars probably. In case some of the major findings have previous literature and for some of them don't have previous literature, how to mention in the discussion page? In case some of the major findings have previous literature. So if there is existing literature for the papers that you have found or your findings that you have, then you can, like I said earlier on, you can either say that your findings align with those research or your findings deviate from those existing research. So you can mention that way. And for some of them don't have previous literature, how to mention it? I don't understand the second bit of your question. If some of them don't have previous literature, because if some of them don't have previous literature, it means that those are your original findings, right? And you don't need an existing literature to state those findings again. So yeah, I think that is not necessary. Thanks, Dr. Vishnu. Yeah, so I've been getting this request for my PowerPoint slides. So I prefer not to share my slides. You can always check them on Google. Sorry, not on Google, on YouTube. And I've given proper breakdown of all the time of what I'm covering in the YouTube description. So you can check that, check it there. Okay, are there any further questions? How to pool the results in a systematic review from the trials with a significant loss to follow for primary outcome. I don't understand your question here. How to pool the results in a systematic review from the trials with a significant loss to follow up for primary. I think your question is coming from a medical discipline, I'm imagining, and your reference is to the clinical trials, I guess, and how to pull the results. So I think you probably have to follow the same process that I have explained in the earlier webinars in terms of how you extract the information. So if you refer to my webinar 4, towards the end, I explain about how you can pick up different bits of information and put it in a table, in a comparative table. So I guess that could be a way to uh, collect all these results in a very systematic way. So I hope that kind of answers your question. If not, you can always send me leave me a message on the research community on my website. As this is the last session, I can't manage to select the articles published in a given period and for a given continent on Google Scholar. How can I do it? You can select the articles for a given period. Google Scholar gives that option. On the left side, if you see, you can key in the number of years that you want to search the papers for. So you can search from 2020 or since whatever that year you want to include. You can include that. For a given continent, no, I don't think that is possible. You would have to read the abstract or the result section of the paper to find out where that study was taken place. Monia, thanks for informative session. Should I include method? How I chose papers in review paper? Yes, so I have covered this in webinar 3. So please have a look at that webinar so you can get an idea of how to choose the papers for your article. Hi Venkat, how are you? Didn't see you early on. Thank you very much for your time and effort in sharing your experience. I've learned a lot from all these webinars that you have conducted, and I have started writing my paper. Okay, that's fantastic. Please do send me when you have completed. I'll be very happy to see your paper. Oh, there you go. You're going to send it to me. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much for your guidance. Thanks, Arti. How about Q3 and Q4 journal articles? Are they still okay to include them? Okay, so my preference and my opinion is not to include them, because if you are going to submit your paper in a Q1 or a Q2 journal, and if they see references to Q3 and Q4 journals, it would be their feeling that maybe you have not selected the best of the best research to include in your summary. So it may kind of act against you. However, having said that, if there are some papers, which are exceptional, maybe they got really high citations in the field, or they have some real major contribution, but for some reason they were published in Q3 or Q4, you could include them and provide a justification within your selection criteria, that is a section 3 of your literature review paper. Yeah, saying that we have mostly selected Q1, Q2. However, these are the few papers which we have selected and they are relevant, but they are published in Q3, Q4. So give that clarity in the paper so that your reviewers know that. I have submit my literature review paper to Q2 journal. Reviewer asked me for revisions. Should I comply to all? Yeah, so my suggestion is respect your reviewers and address all their feedback to the best of your capability. Many a times what may happen is reviewer 1 says do this and reviewer 2 says do that, and this 1 and 2 can contradict each other. So then you have to take a decision of which one you want to go ahead. And when you write a reviewer's response to your reviewer's comments, you can mention that these were two differing, contradictory reviews. We have decided to go ahead with this one, and then give a justification for that. But almost always try to address the reviewers questions that they have. Don't ignore them. You have to comply with all of them. You have to respond to all of them, not comply. You can respond, and if you do not agree with something, you can mention that that no, I do not agree with this one, but you have to respond to all the comments. Thanks. Aarti, can we have session on patent writing? Actually, I am not an expert in that, Aarti, but I know one of my very good friend. He is an expert in that. I could ask him if he is interested in writing, in doing a session on patent writing. And he is he is, I think he was the 8th or 7th ranked in Australia in the number of patent filings in Australia. So he is very, very much experienced in that. Can't thank you for all these valuable information. Thanks, Mariam. Neelam mentions next webinar on meta-analysis, please. Okay, I look for it. I hope to get feedback from all of you and then decide on what I would run next. Okay, so we are kind of 2 hours and 15 minutes into the session. I think we can stop the questions now because I wanted to have, like I said, I have something surprising to do in this session. And so let me move to that. Okay, so what I wanted to do today was, and a lot of you suggested that you wanted to have interaction with me, because so far across all these 5 webinars, it has been me who is talking and you all are listening. So I thought what we would do today is we could run a short half-an-hour Zoom meeting. And all of you who are now online could join the Zoom call, and we could just have informal chit chat. I can talk to you, you can talk to me, and I can actually get to see you as well. So if you are interested in joining the Zoom call, I will share the details now. Okay. Before the surprise, and this is also a surprise as well. All those who have been quite active on the research platform, the community that I have designed, and who have helped me in growing the community, I have something special for you. So I will start with that first, and then the Zoom call. So firstly, we have two people who have kind of got a gold badge on my community, Biju and Rashenda. So for two of you, I am offering a 2-hour free one-on-one research consultation. So you can get on a call with me, and I can answer any of your research questions, anything that you need assistance with. I'll be happy and looking forward to work with you on that. So that is a small gift to you too for being active in the community. Next is Hina. She has also been very helpful. She's a silver member, and quite active on the community, helping a lot of other researchers and so on. So for you, 1 hour free session for the research that you're doing. And for all our bronze members, so we have quite a lot of bronze members, 8, 9, 10, 11 members so far. So for all of you, I will spend 15 minutes with you on one-on-one research consultation. Please email me a suitable time that you would like to have a chat with me. And please keep your questions ready, and so that I can answer them one-on-one. Okay, so yeah, that's it. That's my gift from you for all those who have been with me and been actively pursuing and working towards this. Okay, I would like you to provide some feedback, and I will copy this link in the feedback in the chat window for you to provide some feedback on overall how you think this whole sessions went, and if there is, what is it that you would like to learn next, so I can plan something. Okay, so for those who want to have a chit chat with me now through Zoom, this is the meeting ID 714-1805, and this is the password. So if you are joining there, let me know. I will go online to Zoom now, and we can just have a casual chat. Okay, so I will now stop the recording here. I'll probably share the feedback link, and then I will stop the YouTube broadcast, and I'll see you in Zoom. So take a note of this username, the meeting ID, and password, and I'll wait for you in Zoom.